to round 4 coverage of Grand Prix Memphis. I'm Brian David Marshall. I am joined in the booth by Pro Tour champion Jacob Van Lunen, who is good friends with that man there on the left, Brad Nelson. He is not playing White Black Vampires, I can assure you that. He is 3-0 though. He's playing against Thiago Saporito. He of 2 Pro Tour top 8s, one of the the third generation of Brazilian superstars of the game. He is playing blue-black control Saporito versus the mid-range deck of Brad Nelson. So what's the difference between these mid-range decks and these control decks?
So Thiago Saporito, he's planning on running Brad out of cards and eventually, winning the game through search for Azcanta or just having a Torrential Gearhulk and or Scarab God just finish things off. Brad can have a similar game plan, but his deck is also proactive. And that's something you'll notice about decks that Brad plays basically all the time, is Brad wants to make sure that he's the one who's pressing his advantage. And when you look at his deck list, he's got a lot of weird cards in here, a lot of cards you don't expect to see out of blue-black decks. He has 2 Walking Ballistas. He has a Ravenous Chupacabra. I mean, these are not cards you normally see out of these blue-black decks.
Main deck Gonti, Lord of Luxury, which is a card that really first became popular in the hands of Brad when he was playing that in his green-black Constrictor decks around like Pro Tour Aether Revolt.
Absolutely. I remember I believe he and his brother both top-aided in Pittsburgh playing that deck. Maybe just one of them did. I forget.
Meanwhile, as these guys have gotten underway, a couple of Glint Thief Siphoners, another card that Brad was actually among the first people to really play a lot of. They've both died to Fatal Push. Everyone can take credit for Fatal Push. Everyone played that the moment it was printed.
Yes. Brad played a bunch with this deck on Tuesday. They just spent the entire day playing Magic Online with the deck. Put up a defensible 21-2 record.
I gotta say, if you could take any 3 day ones standard GPs, that might be below expectation for Brad. Where although to be fair, he's not going to have played 9 of those matches. So we see one of you talked about a bunch of the one of Supreme Will. A one of in Brad's deck, and here you see him using it not as a counter spell, but as an impulse. And he is digging for lands here.
Yeah, really important to hit your land drops in these blue-black matchups. More so when it's a control mirror. When you're playing the blue-black control mirror, the most important thing is that you're hitting your land drops and that you're waiting to tap your mana until they do it first.
So now how does that play out? Blue-black, mid-range, a more sorcery speed-based version of the deck for Brad against something like blue-black control from Thiago. Oh, look at this. A Censor takes out a Scarab God.
That's a really nice Censor. So in a matchup like this, it's pretty interesting because Brad doesn't really have the speed to go underneath Thiago, and you would imagine that the pure control deck would be better in the late game. So I'm going to be really interested to see what Brad's plan is when he's playing against these control decks. I think the Embalm on Champion of Wits could be very important here.
Here we see Champion. I think it's Essence Scattered, and Brad might not be terribly upset about that. A 1-for-1 that then he's going to be able to go 4 cards deep into his library if he finds just one more land. There's a Gifted Aetherborn, and he does have the 6th land. And interestingly, perhaps doesn't play it before he puts the Champion of Wits down and maybe baits Thiago a little bit there.
Yeah, it gives his opponent the opportunity to put that card in his graveyard where, it potentially has a whole lot of power.
So 7 lands. Disallow the Embalm on the Champion of Wits from Thiago.
Yeah, and that's a great play there from Thiago. That's something that a lot of people oftentimes overlook. Disallow.
Yeah, you're not countering it, you're countering the ability.
Precisely.
But Thiago, a lot of lands here. Looks like he is out of gas, but he could very well just be holding a Glimmer of Genius here, a Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, there are a lot of cards that Thiago could draw off the top of his library, which would very quickly...
How about an Essence Scatter for a very large Walking Ballista?
Yeah, and that was an important Essence Scatter to have.
And now he draws for the turn, cycles a land, cycles a Fetid Pools. And the Gifted Aetherborn just starts pecking away. And it's weird, we've seen these blue-black decks just like Just doing a little bit of damage with whatever the last thing standing is. Pretty content to have just both sides just whittle away resources.
Yeah, and it becomes a trading game. And the person who trades the best, the person who's able to get the most cards for the least cards, will eventually win in these matchups. Of course, there are, mirror breakers, if you will. If you're able to untap with a card like Scarab God, things end very quickly.
What are the less obvious mirror breakers in a match like that? I mean, something like if a Glint Sleeve Siphoner lives, is that like how relevant is this life gain from the Gifted Etherborn?
I don't think the life gain is exceptionally relevant. It's not much. Gifted Etherborn is the card that Brad is going to most quickly remove from his deck when he sideboards in this matchup.
All right, he's going to attempt another Scarab God here, and does Thiago? Well, he does. He has a Torrential Gearhulk, but you know what? Commit. Wow! And dissolve a good old-fashioned counter war, Jake.
Yeah, and Brad probably a bit
and in
frustrated
the
there.
end, he gets to censor. Just for the extra rub-ins, he gets to censor the Gearhulk. I mean, the Scarab God, because Brad had tapped all his mana in that counter war. Wow.
Yeah, that has got to be.
And now the Torrential Gearhulk is the biggest creature on the board by a considerable margin, but the Gifted Etherborn can still attack through it, or at least trade for it. But the Chupacabra, another one of in Brad's deck. Oh, look at this. Thiago drew so many lands now. All he's just going to draw are like the perfect card every time now. Gets an Essence Scatter for the Ravenous Chupacabra. And now Brad's deciding if he wants to trade his Gifted Etherborn for the Torrential Gearhulk.
Precisely, yeah.
Certainly happy to get into a race, right? If Thiago doesn't block, he's pretty happy here.
Yeah, if Thiago doesn't block, that's great for Brad. I mean, it's essentially a 4-point life swing every time that attacks.
But you can't attack unless you're prepared for this.
Precisely.
Yeah. All right. One card left in hand for Brad. No cards left for Thiago. Could that be anything in hand for Brad? What could he be holding here that he would be thinking about playing?
So there are some interesting things going on. One thing that's particularly interesting to note is that there is a commit memory in Brad's graveyard. I don't think he's going to want to do that and allow Thiago to untap first, but it's also important to note that Thiago's deck can't really do that much on his own turn with that mana. So Brad,
he might be considering playing a land and just we both draw 7.
Yeah,
that's exciting. Start over.
And the fact that you both draw 7, Brad's cards are proactive. Thiago's cards are more reactive. And Thiago can't really do much during his main phase that's too punishing because he has Scarab God and or Torrential Gearhulk, but those cards
what is going to happen here.
Love it.
Brad Nelson pays 6 mana to pay the back end of Commit to Memory, and both players are going to draw 7 cards, shuffle their graveyards back in.
Yeah, and Thiago, how is he going to punish Brad for doing this? He could play a Search for Azcanta. He could play a Torrential Gearhulk. He could play Scarab God, but he doesn't have a graveyard now.
All of those things sound terrible.
Exactly. Those are the only things he can do to really punish
those things sound
this.
utterly terrible.
So the thing that's going on now is that Thiago, he's going to have a ton of answers in his hand. Brad's going to have a ton of threats in his hand, and we're going to have a good old-fashioned fight once again.
Wow.
Till everybody gets down to 0 cards again.
It's like some Magic variant where both players start with 8 lands in play.
Yeah. That is precisely what's going on here. Uh-oh. Thiago's deck fell down.
7 new cards, no mulligans.
Yeah, this is the time you draw your opening hand. You want the all-spell hand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you
might want one land.
You have thinned your deck out of lands pretty considerably, so.
That's true.
Well, at least one land in hand for Thiago.
And that land, though, is a somewhat important land. It looks like it's an Ipnu rivulet.
Oh, I just saw Rich sitting up in his chair again. This could come down to decking. There you get a look at Brad Nelson as he cycles a fetid pools at the end or on his main phase. He's at 32. Thiago's at 10. But the blue-black control deck has 8 untapped mana. 8 untapped mana. It's threatening to, over the next few turns, get to the point where that Search for Escanta is going to transform.
Yeah, and Thiago will get at least one activation out of that Search for Escanta, but Brad does have a Field of Ruin on the battlefield, which he could then use to destroy Escanta, the Sunken Ruin, and make both players search their library for a basic.
Yep, that's bad news. Thiago liked that card. Just passes the turn. This is going to be good old-fashioned draw go here from Thiago's side, but, you know, Brad's got to... He basically has to put the spurs to him a little bit at some point, right?
I would imagine so. And one would think that as the deck with a lot more threats in it, that Brad would need to be more proactive. There are particular matchups that play out strangely at times, though. And I imagine pre-boarded, this matchup feels odd from a lot of angles.
I mean, this is definitely feels odd to, you know, both players draw 7. Both players have all the land they could possibly need to operate their decks.
Yeah.
And neither player is doing anything. I mean, obviously, Thiago played the Search for Escanta, but that is not a long game that Brad can afford to play.
Yeah, the decking war could actually be interesting here from a number of different angles.
Well, here's a Champion of Wits. And you see just a fistful of counter spells. Oh, well, this is kind of interesting here. This is Champion of Wits is going to get -2, -0, which means I believe Brad will draw... Oh, no, it doesn't work that way on this. It's the life gain one works that way. This one does not work that way.
So
he won't have to discard 2 cards here.
I believe he will.
If you do.
Oh, if you do. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And you may draw the cards. So here we see Field of Ruin being activated in response to Moment of Craving.
Interesting. Brad may also be missing the if you do and be fatal pushing his own champion here.
It seems to me almost 0 chance that Brad is missing that. No, he is.
Yeah, I honestly would have also missed the same thing. He thought that he would have to discard 2 cards. Oh, yeah, he does get the draw 2, discard 2, for what it's worth.
And he has enough mana that he can embalm it.
Yeah.
But that's immediately disallowed.
Stands to reason.
All right, crazy sequence there.
This is a crazy game right here. And what's really funny to me is that Brad can aggressively just tap all of his mana, and he can't really get punished that badly for it. I like that when he's doing things like casting these creatures, he's doing so in a manner that makes sure that they are exiled before the turn returns to Thiago. He doesn't want to give Thiago an opportunity to resolve a Scarab God and immediately animate one of these creatures.
I think we're going to see another attempt at Gonti, Lord of Luxury. There's at least one more disallow in hand, 2 more disallows in hand for Thiago.
Yeah, lots of hard counter magic there from Thiago.
All right. Here comes the disallow. And again, Thiago doesn't know what Brad's playing here. He doesn't know that Brad's not playing Torrential Gear Hulks and disallows and cards like that.
Brad actually does have Torrential Gear Hulk. He doesn't have disallow, though. His torrential gear hulks are hitting things like commit memory and.
Oh man, when you get to do the commit memory, because you get to flash back.
Oh, I think
you can't do that anymore. You used to be able to. You used to be able to play memory off of torrential gear hulk.
Oh yeah. Even though yeah, you could do that. That memory is always terrifying for me. A matchup like this is like the one area where that can really shine, though.
Yeah, I've definitely done that on Magic Online. I do not know if you still can for some reason. I believe you can.
Yeah, you should be able to. It took me a second to figure out you're flashing back the other half.
Search for Escanta getting close to transformation. Here's a Scarab God from Thiago, and that's not something Brad wants to see. Well, it doesn't seem like there's a ton. Well, there's a Gonti. That's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, so the thing is that if Brad is going to fight over this, he wants to do so in a manner that ensures that Thiago will not have 4 untapped lands left if Thiago wins the counter war. Because if Thiago is able to resolve a Scarab God and have 4 untapped lands in play, this is really the turning point of the game. This is where the game goes from being, card trading for card, both people running resource into resource, to Thiago gaining a very large advantage.
Brad is in the tank here. All right. He's going to let it resolve, but plays Vraska's Contempt.
Oh, wow.
And Thiago activates the Scarab God in response to the Vraska's Contempt to get a Gonti back out of Brad's yard. And that's what you deserve for playing Gonti. You deserve to have Gonti turned against you.
It looks like Gonti has betrayed Brad on all levels here, because I believe that Thiago has actually taken a Gonti with a Gonti.
Oh, no!
To make matters worse, this is a 4/4 Gonti.
Yeah, this Gonti is very big.
It's a large Gonti. Luxurious, if you will. So yeah, I think that was really the turning point of the game. When we got real deep in this game, that might have been like turn 20 or something. Remember, they've shuffled their graveyards back into their libraries and drawn new 7s already.
All right, so the turn comes back to Brad. Brad also had Supreme Will in hand, it looks like, or did he just draw that?
I believe he did have it, but you see those 3 untapped lands on Thiago's side of the board.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of Gonti going on here.
Oh, it must have not been a Gonti underneath then, because that's just too many Gontis to make sense.
How many Gontis does Brad play?
2.
Okay, so not a Gonti.
Not a Gonti.
And now there you see Thiago Saporito, the Brazilian player.
Now this is a good opportunity.
I love getting an Essence Scatter off the Gonti. I love it.
Especially in a matchup like this, where your Essence Scatter is going to be hitting something like a Scarab God and or a Torrential
It's only going to
Gearhulk.
really hit meaningful creatures out of Saporito's deck. And there's a Ravenous Chupacabra to take out the Gonti. So that comes back. That goes into Brad's exile pile because it was returned with turned into a token with the Scarab God. So it's actually already exiled. And here's a Fatal Push, and that's gonna. Gontis are just falling by the wayside here. Brad stops to think about it again. Yeah, there are. I mean, he has the one Supreme Will, right? Mm-hmm. But no other counter magic. Commit to memory.
He has an Essence Scatter of his own. Commit to memory. Post board, he can pick up a little more counter magic too.
All right, and search for Escanta continues.
It's interesting. to some degree, Thiago may not want to flip the Search for Escanta because it gives Brad an opportunity to get it off the table with Field of Ruin. But,
and you don't have to transform it. You can just let it sit there and just continue to filter the top of your deck. So Supreme Will, end of turn for Brad. He's going to use it in impulse mode. Look at the top 4 cards. Put one in your hand.
And it looks like he found another copy of Field of Ruin, which he may or may not want to do something with.
Yeah, you're still sitting here nervously looking at that Ipnu Rivulet.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's very likely that this game comes down to somebody not having any cards left in their library and being forced to draw. Ipnu Rivulet, it is a desert. Taps for blue mana, comes into play untapped, fine land, and it provides these decks with an excellent route to victory in mirror matches or close to mirror matches like this. Brad's deck very, very good against creature-type decks that are just, one-for-one-ing you and playing guys. But when he's up against his control deck, he's not quite as threat-heavy as some of the other aggressive strategies might be. And as a result, Thiago might have, just an abundance of answers for everything he needs to.
Okay, so Glint Sleeve Siphoners to play for Brad, and Thiago is going to go digging with Glimmer of Genius. So 2 cards, pushes a land to the bottom, it looked like.
And Thiago has filtered his draws quite a bit with the Search for Escanta and has cast quite a few draw spells. I wonder how the card in library count actually looks right now.
But no real way for Brad to punish him on that with the...
No, he would have to natural him that way.
Yeah.
Which one could engineer. And the way that Brad would punish him on that is that Brad would have to kill deserts with Field of Ruins when mana was tapped for Thiago in such a way that he couldn't activate them in response.
Yeah, Glint Sleeve Siphoners starting to get a little scary for Saporito. He has to use Vraska's Contempt on one of them.
Yeah, and here, Brad, even though he had the opportunity to deal with the Ipnu Rivulet in that way, he can't quite go ahead and do that just yet because right now the Search for Escanta is still just too much of a threat.
Right.
If he did that, then Thiago could flip the Search for Escanta over, and that's a win condition.
Now,
a lot of lands.
I was just going to say, he grabbed 6 lands. That smells like Gear Hulk to me. Maybe thinking about Gear Hulking back Vraska's Contempt while Brad's low on mana. Yep, he does have the Gear Hulk there. Oh, Vraska's Contempt was the card that he had gotten with his Gonti. So he's turning Brad's Contempt against him. Gains Thiago some life. And now here's a Gear Hulk from Brad. And again, this doesn't play the same role that it plays in Thiago's deck.
Yeah, it's a much different kind of threat here.
And Brad is targeting Supreme Will. And that's going to get Essence Scattered.
This is a really tight game.
This is super tight.
Both players still have the same exact number of cards in their hand. Brad has that Essence Scatter from Gonti, but this is about as close of a game as I've seen in this format, especially so far this weekend. I mean, we were just looking at resources trading 1-for-1. We thought we saw a big turning point. At least I did.
Brad just tapped 10 mana and played a Walking Ballista.
That's a large Walking Ballista. That's a 5/5.
So this is going to... Wow. No Torrential Gear Hulk into Essence Scatter for Thiago.
This surprises me.
So maybe he's thinking about that card that's under there, knows it could very well. Instead, he's going to go He's offering up a torrential gear Hulk on his own turn. Brad is going to play the Essence Scatter. Does Thiago? Yes, he has a disallow. So he disallows his own Essence Scatter from Brad.
Wow.
Wow, look at him pawing through his graveyard. Vraska's Contempt on the Walking Ballista. Thiago's going to take 5.
Slow grind.
Has the game turned now for Thiago Saporito, even though he is at 9. Both players 1 card in hand. Brad just drew 1 for the turn. Oh, there's a scare. We got another disallow.
Oh, wow. Brad.
Glint Sleeve Siphoner with 5 energy in play.
Yeah, he might have wanted to lead with that Glint Sleeve Siphoner, but it seemed very unlikely that last card would be. Oh,
Fatal Push
my
right
goodness.
off the top.
There aren't many times where you want to draw that Fatal Push so bad on turn 39, but that was definitely one of those times.
All right. Well, there's
All
another
right.
Siphoner.
Yeah, and normally Torrential Gear Hulk closes games pretty fast, but this is not going to be one of those games because Brad, as we know, is at 34.
No, we're getting the library count here, and that means that's probably a desert on top for Thiago.
Yes.
Because he's trying to make a decision about whether or not he wants to keep that, and he's like, "What is this desert worth to me?" He's like, "No, it's not worth it." He's going to transform.
Yeah, and the transform there is really good because it will find him an answer to the Glint Sleeve Siphoner before Brad is able to draw an extra card off of it. Oh, he's passing the turn then. Brad wisely not forcing him to use that with the Field of Ruin on his end step. I like that a lot.
All right, 2 cards for Brad. In comes the Siphoner. Gets a little bit of energy back. Gifted Aetherborn. Still game 1. You talked about that's a card that's probably coming out after this.
It's been a long game 1.
It's been a long game 1. We're coming down to the 20-minute mark. Now Field of Ruin is going to get activated.
Yeah, it has successfully dealt with Escanta the Sunken Ruin.
Is Escanta the Sunken Ruin on the stack here? Or did he activate the land and Brad responded?
I believe he did activate.
Okay, yeah,
so
there
it's
we
on the
go.
stack still.
And Thiago finds a glimmer of genius. Which he's going to immediately cast.
Oh, wow.
One of those a Scarab God?
One of them is, in fact, a Scarab God. And at this point, I believe Thiago has the mana that if the Scarab God goes, uninterrupted, then, he got Torrential Gear Hulk plus Scarab God?
That's going to be a little bit backbreaking here for
Yeah.
Brad Nelson. Yeah, he's going to get rid of that Glint Sleeve Siphoner with Moment of Craving, which is also, by the way, not unimportantly going to gain Thiago a little life. He goes back up to 9.
Yeah.
How much land Thiago has in play? Now he's just going to start bashing in. Gifted Aetherborn trades with 1 of the Gear Hulks, with thanks to Death Touch.
Yeah, and here is the nail in the coffin, if you will.
And, yep, that's enough for Brad. Even though he's still at 20 after that last attack, he knows the Scarab God is just going to be game over.
Yeah, and what a game we just watched.
Wow.
Card running into card, just one-for-ones all day. Thiago leveraging advantage off of Glimmer of Geniuses, getting an activation out of Escanta the Sunken Ruin. Brad lining up a really nice couple of different attacks in terms of the order in which he cast his spells on a few different turns.
Saw a crazy commit to memory. Get to see like this.
Yeah.
Pay 6 to flashback memory, and both of us draw 7.
And after that, there were even points where it looked like Brad had pulled ahead.
Oh yeah.
And even when Brad
MVP there, search for Escanta for Thiago. We talked about how he just kept finding the right card.
Yeah.
But again, he had two chances to find that right card
You're
every
absolutely
turn,
right.
and he never transformed it. He was scared of that Field of Ruin.
And then the turn that he needed to, he did.
Yeah.
And some excellent play there from him.
So what do you think happens here after sideboarding for these two decks? How do these decks adjust to one another? And does Thiago, he has to know at this point that he's not playing against a traditional blue-black control deck.
No, Thiago definitely is a strong enough player that he's not going to sideboard as if he's playing against blue-black control. And one of the biggest advantages Brad has with his deck is that people will likely be sideboarding against him for the majority of this weekend as if he is a traditional blue-black control deck. And when people are bringing in cards like Duress against you, when people are bringing in cards like Jace's Defeat against you, and you are a pile of creatures, that is going to put you in a pretty good position to do well. Thiago, though, he knows what he's up against here, and I imagine Thiago's going to start changing his deck to look a bit more like Brad's deck, to be honest. And I imagine the changes that Brad's going to make are going to make his deck look a little more like Thiago's. And they're going to end up somewhere in the middle, and I imagine that Games 2 and 3 here will be much closer to mirror matches than Game 1.
Okay. Well, so if Brad wins this game, do you think is there time for a Game 3? This already took, a half hour to play out.
It could happen. Like these decks are aggressive enough. Brad could run away with a game with a Glint Sleeve Siphoner, close the game in a few minutes.
Card I'm very curious about out of Thiago's sideboard is Deadeye Tracker. Is that something he's going to bring in, and what can that card do for him?
So Deadeye Tracker is especially strong when you're playing against the God's Pharaoh gift decks in this current standard format. The fact that you can continually empty out their graveyard, especially the versions that use Gate to the Afterlife, you can kind of keep them off that whole plan that their deck has. The other thing that's good about that card, though, is that you can sideboard it in as, a great gradual advantage against people who are taking out their Fatal Pushes against you. And I'm not sure if he's going to bring it in here, but I definitely would not fault him for bringing it in a matchup where he believes that Brad will not have the correct cards to deal with it post-board.
There is a Glint Eye Siphoner for Brad. He didn't miss his energy trigger. He had to use one energy to cast that, and then he gets one energy when it comes in, and he just did a little bit of a shortcut there.
Yeah, and here, Brad with
Moment of Craving. That card has really just been one of the most impactful cards from the new set that I've seen early on here on day one at Grand Prix Memphis. That card's really just done a lot of work. There's Arguel's Blood Feast that you get a look at, Moment of Craving, reminiscent of a card like Vicious Hunger.
The Moment of Craving has been very strong, especially as red becomes more and more popular. The fact that you get to kill a creature and, regain a lot of the life that you might have lost from it having haste or whatnot. It's a really powerful thing.
There you're going to look at Arguel's Blood Fast, a card that reminds you of Greed.
Very much so.
And then when it transforms into Diamond Valley, right?
Yeah, it's like you sacrifice the creature to gain life equal to its toughness.
Of course, it is called Temple of Aklazats, one of the more awkward names. Reminds me of childhood candy, Zots. But
this is a great card in this matchup, though.
Again, Moment of Craving number 2 there. Thiago. There you get a look at Diamond Valley. Sacrifice one of your creatures in exchange for a number of life points equal to its toughness. Note this ability may be used after blocking has been declared. This is a masterpiece in templating.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. Yeah, the guy was listening to Nevermind on repeat while, it just came out. He was really into it.
No note on Temple of Aklazats. Note. Meanwhile, Brad is just digging for cards with his Bloodfast.
Yeah, and we talked about how Game 1 went, where both players were kind of just trading card for card. And if you are in a matchup where you're trading one card for one card and you're able to play a card that just allows you to draw cards at will, that's obviously going to give you a massive advantage. So the fact that Brad was able to engineer that turn where he got Thiago to tap out, he was able to resolve that Bloodfast, that's going to mean that this game is likely very much in Brad's hands. It's Brad's to lose.
Brad pumped the brakes there at the end of that turn, didn't activate the Bloodfast again. Was he worried about his life total, or was he worried about something else, maybe from Thiago, in terms of if he had tapped his mana down?
So at this point, Thiago has access to the amount of mana that he would need in order to start casting Torrential Gearhulk. So Brad's going to want to leave up at least enough mana to interact with that card. The other thing is that at this point, Brad's hand is probably really, really, really stacked. Right? He needs to start running threats out to get the cards out of Thiago's hand.
Clearly no compunction about his life total, because he is, just continues to work the Bloodfast.
And I mean, you don't want to go too low, like to the extent where, an end-step Torrential Gearhulk could just get you. But even that is hard to do, because when the Bloodfast flips, you can use it as a life gain engine.
So here's Gonti, Lord of Luxury. And that's going to earn a disallow from Thiago. Card selection versus card advantage here. Search for Escanta versus Argyll's Blood Feast. So what's the lowest you would feel comfortable going here with the Bloodfast?
I think 6.
Okay.
I mean, you may just want to go lower depending on the texture of the game also. Things get weird.
We've seen that already early on this weekend, that this is going to be a weird standard event. We're going to see a lot of strange things. So weird is on point, I think. All right, so opt for Thiago Saporito. And it's going to then Fatal Push. Yeah, the good opt. It's going to Fatal Push the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. You see Brad has one of his handful of counter spells in hand. He's got that Commit to Memory. Oh, and maybe is one of the cards he's been digging for a Duress, because he just found one. Also, really nice art Duress. Sees Disallow, Vraska's Contempt, Torrential Gearhulk. Kind of a nightmare hand for him.
Yeah, so what's interesting here is that Brad can strand those 2 Contempts in Saporito's hand by not playing a Planeswalker and or a creature, and Brad has Lost Legacy in hand. So if Brad is able to engineer a situation where he's able to get Thiago to tap his mana for something else, he'll be able to completely empty Thiago's hand.
Very nice.
So here he could Lost Legacy naming Vraska's Contempt and then counter a Gearhulk, and he would be home free. So he doesn't have the tools to do that, apparently.
First he's going to chart a course. Looks like he's going to want to do that at a point where he can also commit to memory that Torrential Gearhulk.
Yeah, the other thing is there's absolutely no rush to do that at all.
Well, there is a rush. We're coming down to 11 minutes left in the round.
Oh, yes. In that sense, there's a rush. There's a rush because of the time constraints of the round. But in terms of, if the match was lasting forever, there would not have been. Is by being too aggressive and trying to cast your spells fast, playing fast and loose, you can find a way to lose the game, which otherwise wouldn't be there. I mean, Brad is massively advantaged at this stage. The Bloodfast's just been too good for him.
So now we're going to see him. He's tapping 4 mana. And he's going to actually go to commit. Okay. He's going to commit the Search for Escanta 2 cards deep. By the way, now he can draw 7 on tap if he wants. He's got the Torrential Gearhulks in hand.
Yeah, now this is quite interesting too, because there's only 1 unknown card for Brad in Thiago's hand, I believe.
Yeah, he's got a Torrential Gearhulk, 2. Oh, look at this. And now he's going to shuffle that search for Escanta away by activating Field of Ruin.
Yeah, and now instead of Thiago getting at least one activation out of that search, Thiago will not be getting any activations.
Wow. Okay. This could
so
just
much
be a
nickel and
1-1
diming.
draw here. I feel like Brad is, I would be kicking the advantage bar towards Brad here, but
Oh, yeah, at this point, I think the advantage bar is just massively on Brad's side. If I'm Thiago, I almost scoop because I want to get a chance to play Game 3. But I guess as Thiago, you may be thinking to yourself, well, there's still a chance he can't beat me in time.
that's absolutely true. Under 10 minutes left in the round.
Oh, I think he might be thinking about it.
Trying to figure out how to tap his mana here. Finally just taps 2 swamps and a Aether Hub. And there's Lost Legacy. Okay.
So Brad names Vraska's Contempt.
This could be a huge turning point for Brad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he knows Brad has to have something here. I don't know.
Brad stopped for a second and looked at the Deadeye tracker.
Oh, it is in there?
It is in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you see Lost Legacy. So Vraska's Contempt. No more. And that's a card that sometimes can turn up, 7-8 times in a game thanks to those Torrential Gearhulks. You have Commit Memory, shuffling things back.
Mm-hmm. And a really important tool for dealing with something like Scarab God. Now Brad knows that those Scarab Gods are basically going to be, if they resolve, just recurring threats.
Of course, Thiago does get to draw 2 cards for those 2 Vraska's Contempts. So gets 2 cards to complement the Jace's Defeat and the Torrential Gearhulk in his hand.
And that's nothing to scoff at here.
No, and it draws for the turn. So, the blue-black control deck just, went 3 cards deep into their deck. So anything is possible now, but still a full grip for Brad. So that's 6. So Thiago's just got to get 1 Torrential Gearhulk through.
Yeah, Brad casting Glimmer. It's funny because Brad, if he had seen a different hand, he might have played this game differently because he was able to strand those Contempts in hand and figured, I can kind of guarantee victory. But if he had just ran out threats and traded threats 1 for 1 after drawing all those cards with his Bloodfast, that probably would have exhausted Thiago's resources pretty quickly.
Now, we're going to find out what's going on here. It looks like, oh no, it's a Glint Sleeve Siphoner. I thought he possibly had another duress there. You see Brad counting up his mana because he's thinking about those Torrential Gearhulks. So many options.
I think Thiago has an embarrassment of riches in his hand also. 2 players with a lot of action here.
Yeah, I see at least 1 moment of Craving in hand for him. And so now we're going to see Walking Ballista. By the way, Brad still has to, under 7 minutes now.
Yeah, 24.
He has to do 24 points of damage.
Yeah, and we're saying how advantaged he is, but
I've been in my head. I've been dialing this back.
Yeah, I think it's definitely gotten quite a bit better for Thiago over time.
I mean, time being one of the key factors here.
Absolutely. And to me, it looks like this is probably just going to end in a draw, which is unfortunate for both of these players. I mean,
well, Brad still needs to win this game for it to end in a draw, and he has to do it in under 6 minutes and 5 turns. All right, here comes Torrential Gearhulk.
I was saying probably, not definitely.
And Essence Scatter for Brad. So first things first, got to kill that Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Oh, absolutely.
Lots of energy there for Brad. We've seen this debate a couple times. Which one do I try to kill?
Yeah.
But he does take down. He decides to take down the card advantage engine, leaving Brad with a walking ballista and a huge task ahead of it.
Yes. A mountain to climb.
All right, here comes Torrential Gear Hulk for Brad, who's now picking up his pace considerably as he's no doubt become aware of.
Yeah, time constraints.
Yep, Essence Scatter. It gets met with Negate, but it's just going to draw out a Jace's defeat. And that's going to be another Negate. So this is the hand that Brad's been crafting over the course of this game just for exactly this situation. Glimmer of Genius for Thiago with just 2 mana left. He's like, sure, you can do that. See, Search for Escanta and Glimmer of Genius in hand.
Yeah.
Can he afford to take either of those?
I think he may just need to dig for another copy of Negate and or Jace's defeat.
No, he's going to take both of those.
Okay.
All right, so Torrential Gear Hulk lives. Brad gets to cast Glimmer of Genius.
And he's got to feel good about that.
Pushes both cards to the bottom. Wow. Brad Nelson, that turn 2 Argyll's Bloodfast has just let him craft the entire game up until this huge battle.
Precisely. I mean, he has just figured out that this is the thing that matters. And now it goes down to life total, flips over that Bloodfast.
And so time on the floor has been called. These guys have a few extra minutes. Here's a Duress. Consigned to Oblivion, Glimmer of Genius, and Search for Escanta. He's going to take the Glimmer of Genius. He's got another Lost Legacy here. First things first, swing.
Yeah. Slowly begin to grind away this life total.
Champion of Wits. Wow. Brad's just adding up all the mana and seeing what could happen. He's going to get rid of that second Lost Legacy. Going to get rid of a Walking Ballista. And now does the Scarab God stick? It does. And 4 mana. So the magic number. And that's going to be the game. 2 minutes left in the round, and Brad Nelson evens things up 1 game apiece. It started on turn 2 with Argyll's Bloodfast. And it ended on what? Turn 22, 23. And they're just going to shake hands. There's no time for them to even get their deck shuffled and presented and have time for a game 3. So Brad, in just the nick of time, salvages the best thing he can after losing game 1, which was a draw in this match. So
yeah, and that was a slog. An unbelievable game to watch in game 1. There were so many points where it looked like one of them had found a tiny little window to crawl through to find victory, and then it would find the other player would find some way to wall off that little hole, and just back and forth, back and forth.
All right, I'm not sure how things are working out on the floor. We may have time to show you a little bit more magic, but whatever we do, it's going to be after these commercial messages, so don't go anywhere.